Time code theory itself is a framework for noticing those patterns and reclaiming your hours from the noise. And once you see that time isn't just managed, but lived, the way that you approach performance changes everywhere.
Got questions, we bring the facts. From proven pros who walk the tracks. Business life, no smoke, just flames. Ask the experts, David Williams brings the game.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another amazing episode of the Insurance Syndicate's Ask the Experts. And I'm going to be your host today. My name is Andy Arter. It's great to have you guys back for another week. And before I welcome our guest to the show, I did just want to take a moment this morning, given the circumstances, to take a moment of silence for the passing of Charlie Kirk. And I also want to take a moment of silence for today being the anniversary of September 11th. And so let's just take a few seconds here just to, sit with that, maybe say a silent prayer, and then we'll go ahead and get started. But I feel like it's we need to come together right now, and let's just take a moment of silence. All right. Well, as we move into today's show, I will say I'm very, very excited to have today's guest on, Mr. Cody Loomis. Cody is an absolute powerhouse in both sales and personal development. Cody's the type of guy that dives deep, deep, deep into topics and just has a really, really amazing mind for business, sales, and even beyond that, I would say a layer of life and energy and time. And Cody's built his reputation as one of the top performing sales leaders within the Allstate community and just the insurance community in general. His career as an actual producer and in management and in leadership within an agency, he was one of the top performing sales producers in the entire nation, like not just the state, but within the nation. And what fueled his rise wasn't just talent in sales, but from what I've learned about Cody over the years, it was discipline, it's resilience, it's mindset, it's process that he's built outside of the office. And it's really transformed the performance inside of the business and inside of the office. Through that journey, Cody developed something called the time code theory, which I'm really excited to get into today. And that is a framework that helps people reframe their relationship with time itself. Instead of just managing a schedule, Cody shows us how to code time intentionally, aligning our habits, focus, and energy to unlock higher performance and deeper fulfillment. And today he coaches agency owners across the entire country to help them help their producers get better, hit targets, and build the business that they want, and also just to strengthen themselves as human beings and as leaders within the business. As we dive into today, we're going to dig into his story, his philosophy, the tools, the practical tools that he's got in place that you can take immediately out of this call and implement into your life today and elevate your life, elevate your career. And you guys definitely need to buckle up. Cody is one of a kind. And this conversation is, I think, really going to change the way that you look at time, performance, and balance. So I could go on probably, Cody, for a long time talking about you, because I've known you now for, probably 4 or 5 years, something like that.
4 or 5 years.
Yeah, it's the first time I think we've been able to sit down. I've been able to, in a public setting, dive into your background. Man, it's great to have you on the show today. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I appreciate that. I appreciate you bringing me on, Andy.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to have you on. To look at your career, I knew your story a bit, right? And we're going to dive into it. But I know that there's literally tens of thousands of producers within Allstate. And then there's hundreds of thousands across the country, witnessing that you're able to climb to the highest of the high ranks, right? That very small sliver of top producers nationwide is no small feat. And then when I kind of heard where you had come from and how you ended up where you were, I was even more blown away, because you would think that maybe you went to some, business school, or you went to some, some factory for people that would come out as top producers, but you come from a background that maybe most people wouldn't expect that landed you where you are today. So kind of before we dive into the actual, success and strategies, can you please back us up to pre-insurance days, pre-Allstate days? Like, what were you doing? What did your life look like before that? And then how did you like find yourself landing into an Allstate agency and like starting that journey?
Yeah, absolutely. I was working at Best Buy. I had no sales skill, no service skill. I share that a lot with agents. This specific story when we're looking for new people to hire, but I had no background in any of it. I worked behind a wall fixing computers, geek squad at Best Buy, you know, a little nerdy me sitting behind there fixing. I didn't even interact with the customers. And, you know, I trained who went on to become an agency owner. I trained his cousin, and his cousin had apparently left after a little while and went over to the insurance world. And he had told who became my mentor, he told him about me. And then the story kind of started from there. I was resistant at first because I was like, me, I can't do sales. What are you talking about? And I still remember it to this day, sitting in the car. It was like the 9th time he had called me to try and like convince me to come and work at the agency. And my dad was in the car, he was driving, and he overheard it. And he was like, well, why don't you go talk to him? And I was just like, all right, fine. So I ended up going in and talking to him, and the rest is history. That's where my insurance journey began.
Man, did you start as doing telemarketing, or did you start right and get licensed as a producer? Or like, what was the first role?
I was 17 when I first kind of encountered it and started moving into it, but I was turning 18 very shortly. So I started doing a little bit of telemarketing, just kind of getting the vibe of the office and what everybody would do. And then as soon as I turned 18, I went and got my license, and took about a month. I failed 4 times. But every time I failed that test, Dave would come back and he'd say, come on, one more try, you got it. And I'd be like, all right, fine, as long as someone thinks I got it. And then on that 4th time, bam, passed, and on I went.
Man, that's awesome. And at what point did you realize that like you weren't just good at sales, but you were quickly becoming like one of the better producers in the state and then in the nation? Like, you just walk through that mental experience of like, oh, wait a minute, I think I got something here. I'm not just like casually selling things. I'm actually like really good at this.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I don't think that I ever actually had that moment where I stopped and I was like, oh yeah, I've made it. I'm the top guy. Cause I wasn't really chasing titles at that point in time. I was more obsessed. I'm an obsessive person when I find something that I really like to do. And I had found out that I really like sales. So I really like to learn how to sell, how to connect with people, how to get better at it every single day. So I studied everything, I practiced nonstop, and I implemented what I learned right away. And then by the time that I looked up, I was like, oh man, the numbers are kind of speaking for themselves. I'm pretty good at this, month after month, year after year, I was putting up results that most people couldn't touch. And, it wasn't about raw talent. It was about discipline of constantly learning and applying until consistency started to separate me from everybody else. And that consistency didn't really just come from sales skill alone. It came from the personal disciplines and things I was building outside of the office, which shaped everything that I did inside the office.
Yeah, that's like something that hit me probably 5 years ago, where I started to notice like the discipline and the processes put in outside the office have everything to do with like nurturing the proper mindset, the proper energy levels, the proper approach to be able to come in and crush it in business. And it's all goes hand in hand. So like for you, what personal habits or disciplines were kind of shaping your success there in the early days that were happening behind the scenes that you wouldn't necessarily be able to see if you stared at Cody at his desk, that had happened like long before you stepped into the office every day?
Well, honestly, I didn't start out refined. So it wasn't like I stepped in and I was immediately good at sales. In the beginning, it was more like what I'd say is like raw willpower. So I was just really good at getting to it and trying different things, but I was grinding. I was pushing hard, without much skill at the start, I would say. And then over time, the skill started to develop, kind of like when, you role play a lot and things like that. But I still felt like I was a bit unsatisfied, almost kind of like a shell of who was a person just kind of going through the motions. And that's when the actual shift happened. I actually stopped. I was prescribed Adderall for about 8 years. And I have a feeling that's what caused a lot of that feeling of like, oh, I'm really good at this, but is that crutch what's helping me be really good at this? And when I stopped that, that's when I started building balance into my life, because, you know, when you stop something like that after a long time, it hits you hard with anxiety and depression and things like that. So when that started happening, that's when I really started to implement structure into my own life with fitness, and my mornings were structured, and journaling and reflection and reading. Reading was a huge one for me because it gave me a perspective outside of my own little bubble, because I wasn't really talking to people. I was kind of in like a loneliness state or something like that. And I studied a lot of psychology and leadership and philosophy, pretty much anything that could make me a bit sharper, not just as like a salesperson, but as a person, because I was trying to redefine my sense of self and who I was, because a lot of my time through adolescence was just built on every day I was taking the stimulant that was prescribed to me. So when I stopped, I was like, oh God, what's going on? You know?
Yeah, 100%. And it's like, it sounds like, part of it was like maybe focus and energy levels, right? But then you're also talking about, like, what I'm hearing is you kind of had to face life without a filter, and like that actually put you through the fire of like refinement. Is that fair to say that it was almost like a buffer that, brought you from having to face reality head on to, like, when you transitioned away from it, you had to basically just, like, without any crutch, just figure it out? And that's actually like what led to like a lot of like personal development, or am I misinterpreting that?
No, you're spot on. I mean, it was essentially, I was corrupting my own hours by using something like that that made me feel like I was really good, but honestly, it was kind of shallow. That's why I used the reference of like a shell, because, I had built a version of who I was, but that version of who I was built on the crutch of using something like Adderall, even though I was prescribed it, but I don't think when that stopped, it was just a wall that I hit, and like, I didn't know what to do, because I was like looking back, and it was kind of all a blur of everything that I had learned between that time and then. And I was like looking forward, and I'm like, oh gosh, who do I want to become? So I had to do what I did, which was just dive in and start learning stuff. And, there were some key moments where certain things happened that caused me to do that. And, as I was learning from all these big people and big thinkers and speakers, I was taking their habits seriously, because, when you're depressed, you get really lonely and you're not really talking to anybody and you just feel alone. So books were kind of my companions in that point in time. I always listened to them. I say read, but I mean, I listened to them, but they were my companions, and I was taking that seriously. Those were my friends at that point in time,
Man, oh man, thank you for like being open and vulnerable. I really appreciate just hearing like the truthfulness to that story. And what like main mistakes do you think that many sales producers and salespeople make when they kind of just focus all on the numbers and not on themselves? They like throw their own life on the train tracks just to go all in on a number. I mean, I'm sure you've seen a lot of that over the years. Maybe you've even been that guy at certain times. But I mean, what mistakes are you typically seeing where people are just not breaking out of that, like that habit of like, hey, I'm going to sacrifice my own mental clarity here? And, where were they like actually inherently holding themselves back because of that?
Yeah. Well, I feel like they burn out. That's usually what happens, right? Especially if it's a business owner, they know what that looks like. They burn out, they plateau, or they hit big goals because they've structured everything in their life around that, right? So that can hollow you out as a person, So focusing only on numbers, it's kind of like trying to build a house without a foundation. You might get the walls up really fast, but first storm that comes through and that thing is collapsing. So that's really the difference between myself and others who technically had the same opportunities. Was I was building a really, really strong foundation from the ground up, because I had lost sense of who it was that I was supposed to be when that all took place, But I was smarter at that time. I wasn't a kid anymore. I knew.
Even though we probably still feel like kids a little bit out here every day.
Oh, yeah.
At least
I even act like one every now and then.
Yeah, exactly. Oh man. Well, that's, I love the analogy of like, hey, you got to build that like foundation on a personal level. So you're prepared for the storm that comes through. And I could see that, where if somebody's just coming in and playing the numbers game and they're not putting in the work outside, and they see, a job as a job versus like a job being an extension of themselves and a way to like serve and grow. It's like, you really got to take on a completely different approach to this thing and build that foundation. So one of the things I'm curious about, because you work with a lot of agency owners, like I've, witnessed you coaching, guiding, and working with everything from your, brand new scratch agent to some of the largest agencies in the country. And if you were coaching an agency owner today on scaling their sales team and scaling their production through their sales team, what's the first like mindset shift that they need from what you've witnessed is like a gap for a lot of agency owners mentally?
That's a great question.
Yeah,
I would probably say, stop trying to fix just the numbers. I feel like a lot of people that I meet and talk with, the numbers are important. Don't get me wrong. They are important. You have to be aware of the numbers so you know the trajectory that you're on. But when it comes to training and developing your team, I mean, I'd say 8 out of 10 agents have no formal discipline training that happens every day that I talk to, which blows my mind sometimes. But start developing the people. Right? Numbers are the lagging indicator to that. That's what comes after. If your people are unrefined, then they don't hit the numbers. So if you invest in the people, in their mindset, in their energy, in their confidence, the numbers will follow. So just there's too many leadership people out there that I see, and sometimes I interact with them. Their team's like a spreadsheet, and that's how they will feel. They'll feel like they're just a number on the board. If you flip that, then you'll see growth, and that's where the real ripple effect starts to begin.
Yeah, I'm going to go off a beaten path here a bit with a curveball question. Would you mind sharing maybe a story of an agency owner that you've worked with that was that spreadsheet numbers-based leader, and they actually like adopted what you're talking about, and then what kind of ripple effect you saw that have like over the long haul in their business? Just like a real world example of like, hey, this was them day one. This is them 90 to 120 days later after making this shift, and like what they saw happen.
Yeah. So, I'll speak of the agency that I worked at, because it didn't start out perfect. We grew into what we became, and the culture shifted violently. A lot of young people came in, a lot of the older people stepped out, and a couple of the things that Dave used to do in order to kind of help us refine ourselves as humans is, number one, we had a giant library, right? So we had a huge library, and we were all friends inside of the office. All the sales guys, we loved competing against each other. We would constantly do different games and contests and things like that. But like, it was a really fun environment. We'd have office parties outside of the office after hours. We played basketball together. So he took a very directed approach to the things that he was doing and putting in the office in order to help us grow and learn as people, because a lot of people would go and sit on the love sack that we had in the side room and grab a book off the wall and just be sitting there reading it on a 15-minute or a 30-minute, because you can't, like, as you hear me say this as an agency owner, you can't force helping someone develop. You have to inspire them to want to become better people. That's the challenging part. You can't just say, hey, read this book and this is what's going to help you become a better person, right? If you say that to me, my ego's going to go, who are you? What the heck?
I'm not reading that book.
Yeah, you just kind of put it in front of me, and then it's available, and then my people's natural curiosity rises, and they start to pick up on those things and develop themselves, and then the benefit is the ripple effect of success that usually follows.
100%. And you kept a lot of journals, right? Like I think from talking with you, you've kept a pretty close log of everything that you've gone through and learned through that experience, correct?
Yeah. It's a fat one. Every single Friday, when I realized something special was happening, something unique was going on, because I picked that up pretty early, just because like I really wanted to go to work. I was hanging out with all my buddies. We had contests. Dave was really good at finding exactly what everyone in the office, like he would watch our social medias and he'd know exactly what it was that we all wanted. And he would buy like the best version of it and put it in the center room and be like, whoever wins this month can take this, and then all the boys are like, oh, I got to get that. So the fire and energy was just crazy. He used to run around with a bell. We'd get a sale and we'd be like, Dave, just got a sale. And he'd have this cowbell and he'd run around and ding the cowbell. So like, it was just a very fun, energetic, probably not your typical setting of an insurance agency, but that's the point, right? You don't be typical, be better, be weird.
100%. We when I was working when I met you actually for the first time, I was working in an office in Miami, a sales floor, and we had one of those like South American like scratch cans. We'd run around and scratch that thing. And, it's almost like that culture, that environment, you walk into some offices and it's just dead. It's just like everyone's professional. They're very nice, like cool, but there's no energy happening. And it's like to do great things and to make big leaps. I mean, you've got to animate the business and like the cowbell, you walk down the hall and it feels like you're walking into a freaking football ststadium, that's it right there. And and I remember seeing you guys inside of there and everybody wanted to do better. There was, great build out. And that's something that like, I know from like what Dave did is really also focus on like the environment, right? And like the pods and the way that you guys were organized. Do you mind real quickly? I know we're kind of going off the beaten path here, but do you mind quickly just talking about like that environment compared to like, other offices that you've seen and like what maybe an agency owner looking at this right now can think with in terms of, hey, this might not just be training processes and how I inspire my team, but it's like the actual schedule, the layout. What sort of intentional things did you see being done inside the office in terms of routine, training, layout, so on and so forth that you also think like probably definitely contributed to that growth cycle?
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to note that when, you want your team to want to be a team, not just people that work together. Now that's really hard to do in today's culture because every meme, every joke out there says, if the person hiring you says we're a family here, run, right? That's the culture right now. So it makes it a bit more challenging. So you got to be a little bit more subtle with it. And that's what Dave was, I mean, we hired a lot. He used us to hire people who were like us. So the founding LSPs, I would say, he would tell us, hey, $500, go find somebody who's just like you, get them. If they get hired and they stay for 6 months, $500. So all of a sudden, all the friends of the friends were getting hired into the office and it was a ripple effect, and then once the foundation of the culture was built and I feel like he started to work out these different things he would do, the activity, the basketball court outside that he put in, we had a cryo chamber, all these crazy different unique technologies and stuff. He would always make sure it was in the office and accessible to us because like he created an environment where we wanted to go to work. The mornings was always the same thing. It was 10 minutes of training, learn something new, bring it to the meeting. Once we're at the meeting, everybody's going to share something that they learned that's new, why they're going to try and implement it. And then at the end of the week, we're going to come back and we're going to talk about what that thing was and how it worked. And we're either going to add it to sales process. So it was a constant like sharing of ideas amongst everyone based on the actual data of I used this multiple times over the week. Did it work? Now you extrapolate that by 52 weeks. That's 52 brand new things codified into your sales process. You don't keep all of them. If they don't work, you get rid of them. But that can make your sales team grow extremely fast. And but it requires constant attention and leadership. If you let it fall by the wayside, if the cat's away, the mice are going to play. That's just how the world works,
100%, man. That's incredible to hear just that perspective. And one of the things that I was thinking with as well, Cody, was, I don't know if you remember this, but probably 3 to 4 years ago, you and I were working with a group of agents and you developed a document called Success Beyond the Sign. And it was really to help tee up an agency owner on how to fast start a new producer and get them up to speed fast and, overcome that 90-day band where a lot of times people can come in, they just don't give quite enough effort. There's not enough intentionality. There's not enough guidance or structure to like their onboarding. And then they can fail pretty quickly versus like your plan, which was here's how you ramp somebody up and get them past that 90 days and get them producing like twice as fast as a normal producer. Mm-hmm. Do you mind just breaking down from your own experience, right? When you were in there making, I undoubtedly probably hundreds of calls a day, and you had a process for building your pipeline, flushing your pipeline out, getting referrals, like to be at the level you were at, you had to run it's not all just like, oh, I have a good attitude. Like there's a process to that, right? And I'd be really curious if you could share for anybody on here who's maybe feeling like, man, I've been doing this. I've been hiring people. They've been coming in, doing mediocre. I lose some of them versus an agent who comes in and they seem to almost be like top producer factory, right? And there's
Mhm.
the process difference behind that. What would be maybe your quick hitting, like top 2 or 3 best tips on how to fast start somebody and
Yeah.
really make sure that they like push through that first 90 days?
Well, luckily, I remember Success Beyond the Sign, hopefully, because I designed it, right? So the first 30 days is really focused on productivity goals, right? Because a lot of agents will hire when they need to, right? Not when they want to. There's a big difference between the two. So when you hire when you need to, you have time to really cultivate someone into the culture, into the agency. So the first 30 days is all the pressure doesn't go on getting sales. All the pressure goes on, number one, getting your license, but also once you have your license in that first 30 days, it is productivity, just making sure that they're doing the dials, they're taking the actions that are going to then lead to success. And if a sale comes through, celebrate the hell out of it. Get crazy with it, right? That's like a Pavlov's dogs type thing. Now, after the first 30 days, the second month, half goals, right? They're not fully fledged yet. They're still in the nest. They're starting to get feathers, but they can't fly just yet. You push them out the nest, what's going to happen to a bird that doesn't have its full flight feathers? It's going to fall and slam into the ground, right? So it's half goals. You set the goals, you celebrate every single win. You motivate, you make sure the training is disciplined and thorough, and that all your bases are covered. I come across a lot of agents when I'm doing these coachings and stuff where they're like, I just don't know why it's not working. I said, well, tell me your process. Oh, I don't have one. Well, there you go. That's why it's not working, because you don't know if you're giving every single person the same exact experience through training every time. It's not a system. It's just you training. If you're ultra busy or you got something going on in your life, that's going to impact how they're trained or the window through how they see how you're training them, right? And they're super sensitive to that because the insurance industry isn't like anything else. So they can't just step in and be amazing unless they've been in it before. And that's not where you get your strong hires, truth be told. You go to any big agency, your top 5 guys, did you hire them or did you grow them? And well, they grew them because they planted them as little baby seeds and grew them into a tree. But then we get to the last month, full-on goals. Full responsibilities. The expectations should be clear. They know how to get the activity. They know how to, catch food for themselves, and they know how to kill the food for themselves because they practiced it a little bit the month before. From there, it's just consistent training, right? Consistent training is the most important thing. We were 10 minutes every single day, right? And throughout that week, I didn't speak necessarily to that part earlier, but throughout that week, the 10 minutes would shift to how did it go yesterday with what you picked on Monday? How did it go yesterday with what you picked on Monday? And we would just give that feedback. And then sometimes I'd take someone else's idea. They're like, oh, I'm getting amazing results. I'm like, ooh, let me add that to my little armor of sales here, So that environment has to be created. And if you don't have that environment and you bring someone new in, whatever's right there right now, you're not going to change it when you get a brand new person in. It has to be changed and then brought over. There has to be boundaries set. Your team's going to hate it at first, but they're going to get used to it. I can remember 1,000 times where I used to hate it, and then I was used to it. And I was like, actually, now I see why we started doing this. Look at that. The leader was right.
Yeah, that's definitely like what I've found with top producers. There's going to be probably at some level a degree of ego involved. And I think that's one of the toughest things is to be like, forfeit the control over and be like, hey, they're in the position they're in for a reason. They've led and built this house that I'm working in anyway. So sometimes just like following people is tough if you're like a single-minded top producer type mentality, but that's huge to kind of hear your perspective of like, hey, I've got my own flavor, but at the same time, like I'm willing to go through some discomfort here to follow a plan. And then finally, and then I want to get in specifically to time code theory, which I'm pumped for. But before we go there, can you walk us through peak performance, Cody, right? Whatever year that was, think back to like a week or a month where you were just on fire. It was just deal.
Yeah.
So that's not magic. They didn't appear out of nowhere. There was discipline and action being put in. So what would an actual high performance, like top 1% of all the days you ever performed, what does it look like? How many dials? What kind of speed are you using? How do you pivot? Like, what does a day in the life of a top producer look like? If you kind of just flash us back to the good old days.
Yeah, for sure. Things are a little bit different now, but I mean, in theory, I guess it could still apply. So this was back when I was running Team Alpha. We were putting out like I don't even know, like 250, 280 items between 3 people. And we had a very like methodical way that we would approach it. So on Monday and Tuesday, we would all make 500-600 dials. We developed this little system called the quick value quote system, where we wouldn't put pressure on the person to sell. Now, if they were throwing themselves at us to sign them up, we would just sign them up right there on the spot, but that was pretty rare. So we would infuse a ton of value into the conversation and then kind of play hard to get, kind of like when in like relationships before you started dating a girlfriend or a spouse, they play a little hard to get. And it's like, all right, well, they're looking for my consistency. And it's the same theory. So we would do those first 2 high impact days, quick quotes. So it was focused on getting as many quotes as possible. Wednesday, we would all get together and we would make a ginormous list and we would color code it green, yellow, and red based on how likely it was to close on the next phone call. And we would also do swaps where if like there was a prospect who was like really like uptight and serious and matter of fact, that wasn't my selling style. All 3 of us had our own unique selling style. So we would say, hey, can you call this guy and close this up, act as the manager and try and close this deal up for me? So we would swap sales like that. And then on Thursday and Friday, be totally focused. Thursday would be a total focus on all the greens. We would try and, clean up the house. And then Friday was yellows and then reds from the previous Friday. So we would give those people a little bit more room to breathe each week because they were a little bit tougher. We would usually do like, if we had time, we would do like a little touch on them. But that seemed to be like a pretty strong process because we were putting massive types of output on the items front doing that. So massive work, cool down, plan, share, and then execute.
And then like rinse and repeat.
Pretty much. Yeah. The manager hated us because there was no sales Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then all this, it'd be 80 items between 2 days, between 3 people. And he'd be like, phew. So he was always like biting his nails, every week, like, oh God, the sales going to come. And then the sales would come. Sometimes they didn't, but when they didn't, he would just be like, come on, guys. He'd pull us in and be like, hey, what's going on? Because he knew how our process works. So he'd be more like, this week didn't hit, did it? And it's like, no, it didn't,
okay. Like,
yeah, pretty much. Yeah, just a little check-in. And it was always a positive tune, which is just so important. It's just to stay positive, even if the sky is falling, you got to stay positive because you are the emotional lightning rod for your agency or your business, whether you want to be or not.
And that's so true. Yeah. And you are the business. Like when people transact with you, you're representing the brand, but you are the brand in that case. But I love what you said about like a cyclical plan to like do massive action, build the pipeline, and then intentionally flush that pipeline out. I've operated the same way for a number of years and always found that to be the best. And you got to like, if you're new to this game and you hear that advice, the first couple cycles of it are going to be terrifying because you just don't have the bearing to know that it's going to work out. But once you get into that cycle of like build, flush it out, you begin to like develop like a faith, right? Where it's like, I know like 90% of the time, if we do X, Y, and Z, it's going to build a big enough pipeline. And it's really crazy if you actually sit and you're in halfway through that cycle. And I don't know if you've had those moments where you're like, is this the right thing to do? Like, this is crazy to not be like constantly in closing mode. But then the worst feeling is if you don't have a process like this and you got 2 days left in the month and you got to hit a goal and you're like, well, I'm going to go close some deals. And then you're like, but what deals am I going to close? I don't even have a pipeline. So it's like the pipeline is bedrock and the foundation for everything else. And I don't know if you've seen this, Cody, but it kind of changes your confidence level. When you're just chalking the pipeline full of people, you become less desperate to chase down the wrong deals. And you can like see through people's deceit a little bit easier if somebody's like stringing you along, but they're not going to do business. It's like the fuller your pipeline, the more level-headed you are when you're interacting with people. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. You've pulled me into what I would call the pest code here. One thing that I can viscerally remember is there was never the fear of if it didn't work this week, Dave or the office manager would come in and like put a hammer to my knuckles. Like that fear didn't exist. And whether you think it or not, as an agency owner, as a business owner, like you're the authority figure. It's like the guy with the lab coat telling the dude to shock the person next to him, but they can't see him, increase the voltage every time. It's the same principle. You have to always remember that as the authority figure is that they are afraid of you, right? You have to work on that, and you have to work hard on that, because if they just naturally trust you and they know, hey, this week didn't go too well, it's all right, tell me what you got for next week, right? That approach versus, why didn't you sell this week? Or just one meeting, tell me where you're at, right? They'll dread those meetings. That's not going to be helpful, because they're scared, because they're not where they are. You have to give them that room to breathe and try things and maybe get it wrong, but stay on top of them. Like, hey, what are you doing? What is it that you're working on? That kind of thing. Dave was a master of that one. So was the office manager at that time.
And I've witnessed that as well. He most certainly is. And there's an art to it, man. There's an art, and you got to have some faith as a leader as well to be able to operate, but you got to have the right people in place too, to know that, hey, the work ethic's being put in, we're going to get there. So I want to transition over to time code theory, if you don't mind, which, for me is a new concept, right? And I think for a lot of our audience is going to be kind of new. So we might need a bit of a Cliff Notes explainer of the actual time code theory. But I know it's not just for sales. I mean, it applies to entrepreneurs, leaders, employees, in any field. And I'd be curious if you could just give us like a breakdown to wrap our heads around time code theory and like how that translates into your life, but also into an agency. And then we can dive a little bit deeper into it once people have kind of a foundation for it.
Yeah, I'll kind of merge the two. Still currently in progress of writing the book itself, like 10 years in progress ever since I stopped taking Adderall. It's kind of where this all happened. It's funny because I mentioned it to Dave. He's like, oh, I remember when you're talking about time code. I'm like, it's a book now, so if we're going to speak to how it kind of applies just outside of the lens of sales itself, right, it widened that a little bit, is because at its core, right, time is one resource that every single person shares. Every single person shares it, whether you want to or whether you're not. As soon as you're born conscious, a little zygote inside of a lady, that's how that happens, right? It doesn't matter if you're an entrepreneur, doesn't matter if you're an employee or a leader, your relationship with your hours is shaping how you show up, right? Now, in sales, just to turn it back for a second, is I saw it in numbers, right? But when you zoom out, it's bigger than business. It's a parent who feels like their hours are slipping away, knows what that pressure is. An entrepreneur burning out knows it. An employee stuck in endless meeting knows it. Time code theory itself is a framework for noticing those patterns and reclaiming your hours from the noise. And once you see that time isn't just managed, but lived, the way that you approach performance changes everywhere, which leads right into some universal truths I've seen, no matter what field that you're in.
Yeah. And man, oh man, not a lot of people spend a bunch of time on the topic of time, but we're all living in it. And to your point, like it is the fabric that we are born into. And so I'm really, really excited for the release of your book, and I'll definitely be getting a copy and reading through it and sharing it out. But could you kind of break down some of those universal truths that you've seen about time and discipline and performance across like multiple industries?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that there's about three, like you got me all hyped up. I love talking about this. So I would say that there's about three that kind of, when you ask that question, there's three that stand out as universal truths. For first would probably be for clarity, always beats busyness, right? Being clear and concise in what it is that you're doing. You can pack your calendar, and people have probably done this before, but you can pack your calendar full of activity. But if your hours aren't coded with any sort of purpose, you're just spinning. You're throwing things on your calendar, and you are showing up really not paying attention. You're not fully present in that moment. Second would be structure beats chaos every time. That applies to every person on the planet. So people think that sometimes building a structure into your life is restrictive, but it's actually freedom, right? Because when your day has that rhythm, when you've built in that focus, recovery, and connection, then you get more done and you feel less strained. So everything has more intention behind it, and you're more present in that given moment of time. And then I would say that the third one is awareness beats autopilot, right? Most people, I feel like, drift through their hours without noticing how they're actually living them. And that's what time code theory flips. It shows you that your hours aren't just neutral. They're not just something to be run on autopilot. They're always being written by something. The moment you see that, and if that doesn't just apply to individuals, it's even more powerful when leaders understand it. Right? When you're helping people understand that just running through life, time itself is code. And code is time relative to oneself. And nobody can tell you how you experience your own time.
Man, oh man, that's a lot to unpack, and love it, love it, love it. Can't wait to dive deeper into it once the actual full text is out. But for today, right, with our audience, we've got producers on here and we've got leaders, agency owners. I'm really curious how you see this framework impacting the leaders who are on this call today, not just the individual producers, but like if you're running an agency right now, how do you take what Cody just said and translate it into like actionable changes within your business? Or maybe to start, it's not changes immediately. Maybe it's just like a log or an observation of like where you're at today. I don't know what that looks like, but I'd be curious what, the main takeaways that you'd recommend for a leader to like take that concept and put it into action.
Yeah, I think, even some of the stories that we've told today of my past and, how Dave used to act inside of the office and how he used to do all of these different things to make it fun, right? Leaders don't just set the strategy. It's not, securing an hour for yourself, writing out a plan on Microsoft Word and then implementing that plan. That's not what a leader does. That's what a boss does. Boss is really good at doing that, but leaders, right? Leaders, they set the rhythm. It's the tone that is followed. The best leaders that I've ever worked with aren't only measuring outcomes, but they're shaping how their people experience the hours it takes to get there. So they build flow and they build structure so people can stay engaged without burning out. Right? People are enjoying the hours of their own time. So that's really what leadership is coding the collective time, right? And that's actually something that's oddly enough structured inside of the book is collective time itself and the practices that it takes to do that. But a great leader can walk into a room and reset the tempo for everyone. If there's a nasty tension in the room, they can reset that. That is a strong leader, and they can create space for focus when things get a little bit noisy, or they can bring energy when things get a little bit flat. They don't just manage projects, they manage the experience of time inside the team. And when leaders do that, people don't just perform better, but they feel better while doing it, which is why balance matters, because that's how your people become better. That environment that you create inspires them. They go and they master a framework, say like time code, and then you're using those same exact theories and frameworks to create that environment where they are going to grow like you're throwing like some speed grow on the plant. The sun is booming inside that office, and it's just like everything's more colorful, everything's funnier, more fun. I'm reminiscing in my own head of like some of the times inside of the office, and that's the environment that you want to create, but it has to be in that disciplined structure.
Man, and looking at it from a producer's perspective, right? And even like, I'll take it this far. Let's say you're working from home for an agent, right? And you're 600 miles away from their office, and you wake up inside of your, as we call it, the lonely island syndrome. I'm all alone. Like I'm working from home today, right? I got this desk here, nobody around. I'm not in that office environment. And even if I were in an office environment, there has to be some personal transformation as a producer. I'm curious for you, like if you're a producer listening to this call versus the leadership perspective, what sorts of like habits or disciplines or mindsets can producers start working with to like develop that energy shift and like also be like their own leader, if that makes sense, because sometimes we got to lead ourselves and it's not going to be an outside leader who can motivate us to like make a change. It's got to be from within. So what advice would you have then for like the producer versus the leader?
For the producer, number one, if your employees are working remotely, and they're going to gripe and they're going to hate me for saying this, but get everybody together on Microsoft Teams, on Zooms throughout the workday, right? Because that's how Lonely Island Syndrome begins, is when someone sends a chat, right? If you chat out, how's it looking today? One person says, good. One person says, great. One person says, awesome, right? There's no tonality in that. Text is just a mode of communication. You need to hear how their day is going, not chat me over how your day's going if you don't want me to be mad at you, right? Because they're not going to say that. It's the ego getting in the way. They're salespeople. So if one person's saying, great, and the other person's saying, awesome, very big difference in who you need to talk to as a leader in that point in time. Now, I had to address that particular thing because you brought up Lonely Island Syndrome, and that's what that is your team not being really a team and everybody scattered on their own islands. Some employees like that. that's fine, but it could be better. That's the point of putting everybody together and creating that environment. You're letting yourself off easy, Mr. Agent and or business owner, by letting everyone go off and do their own thing, because it's less work for you in reality. Now, when it comes to a producer, what producers can do is, it's probably my favorite line at the very beginning of the book itself, is fall back in love with the hours of your own time, right? That's the secret, getting re-engaged with structuring and being disciplined. And it sounds like a lot of work, and it is, but you can do it in a digestible way. And it's like habit forming. There's a lot of resources out there. I don't technically go directly into habit forming itself, but the framework is going to help you understand how to get into the mindset, and then everything else really cascades. It's like a domino effect to make you fall in love back with your own hours, So journaling, reflection, working out in the mornings, getting some form of workout in the mornings, optimizing your diet, optimizing your sleep, all of that stuff. If you want the best possible experience with your own time, those are the things that you have to do, and you want to get obsessed about it. So,
man, it's so wild you say that too, because this morning I was just thinking about this before I started my day, and I was just reflecting on the fact that we all grind so hard and push to like achieve the milestone in the business or the impact or a certain client base or whatever it is, right? And we all have that like end goal, but then, we can go through days or weeks or months where it never seems like we've quite arrived, because we never do. We reach that goal and then we're like, well, I already forgot about that goal because I'm on to the next one. There's this constant kind of just like empty bucket syndrome, I think, where people are trying to fill that bucket and it can never be filled. So I love the line, like, fall in love with your own hours again, which is where, like, even today I walked into the day kind of trying to set that intentionality. Although after reading what you put together, I think I'll get better at it. Just setting the bar early in the day and saying, like, I'm not worried about tomorrow or a week from now or a month from now. Like, getting excited about, like, let me change something. Let me radically, like, shift my life right now. Maybe I need to rework my time. Maybe I need to do a Pomodoro timer and like condense my time down. Maybe I need to, study something different and just that experience of time and what you choose to do with it. And then relishing right now. Cody and Andy aren't thinking about what we're doing at 11:30. We're like, this is the only September 11th, 2025 at 11:19 in the morning we're ever going to do together. So, like, let's just be here in this present moment.
Yeah.
And that kind of leads me to another question about balance, because I've seen with you and heard, and witnessed really your ability to create a balanced life. Granted, extreme in a lot of areas, but as a whole balanced, as a compliment to you, right? So it's not balanced isn't like a boring vanilla. It's like, no, like I'm getting the most out of like all areas of my life. And I'm curious for you, like why that is so important to you. And, really for you, if there's rituals, habits, things you got to do to remind yourself of that, a gut check that you go through, just the psychology of Cody, right? When you're working to make sure that, hey, I'm crushing it on the business side, but I got the balance over here and I'm keeping that energy unit and that baseline like where it's supposed to be. What does that look like today?
Well, today it's the funny thing about the theory that I was designing is, I was designing it in probably like the 4 worst years of my life. So I kind of fused with it and forgot a lot of it until I started writing the actual book on it, because it became the framework of how I experience and live my life. And those were the things that followed in doing so. But balance itself, right, is I've seen what happens to people when they hit their big goals, or they strive for just this one thing, and that's the only thing that matters. And then I see that they lose everything else that matters, right? And that was what like shocked me in terms of like, I'm not just going to chase money. I'm not just going to chase goals. I'm not just going to do this one thing. You have to have balance in the hours of your own time in terms of, that's where the structure comes into play, because I hate structure. I'm a very fun guy. I like to just roll with the waves of the universe, but structure is what makes it so that when I do things, I'm doing them in a way where I know exactly what to expect. I know how I'm going to how much energy I'm going to put into this, and allows me to determine, if it's all written out, you can realistically determine what it is that, how much you're going to apply to that specific task that you're doing. I do it in work now. If my calendar is completely full, there's some stuff where I'm like, okay, if I prepare a little ahead of time, I can get that knocked out real quick. That should be a real easy one. Oh, that one, we're probably going to have to extend that one a little bit. So let me structure this over here. That's a constant battle in what I do now, is having enough time. And the way to have enough time in a day is to make sure that your relationship with time itself and how you operate within it is really balanced and disciplined, because if you're sitting there and you're thinking of, if you let's just say you step into your own future code. That's what I call it anyways. Your own future code is, we've all had it, anxiety. That's where you're putting, your mind is putting you in the future. And in the future, there is a trillion different things that could happen. Your brain can only process so much, right? Not only that, but it loves to gravitate to just the negative things. So that's what your brain's going to gravitate towards. Then you're spooling yourself up, get nervous. Oh, that's definitely the thing that's going to happen because of this. That's not going to work. You're going to fracture your time doing that. And then we step back, you're going back into the past. You're like, oh, I could have done it this way. I could have done it this way. You're stepping back into the past code. Your mindset is now shifted back in the past. You can't change the past. So you sit there and you ruminate on it. And that was the heavy experience of depression I have, was like, man, I wasted all these years. I don't even know who I am right now. What the heck? I'm so sad and upset with myself. And now I'm feeling lonely. So making sure you have that balance will create a much more forward present for you. And that's where you want to try and stay, is in the present, but a little thinking about the future, but not being too attached, and a little bit of thinking about the past so that you don't repeat the same mistakes. Is a good balance.
And thank you for all this. This is amazing. And one of the other things I definitely wanted to get to before we wrap up is what legacy means to you. I know that's something that, you talk about and write about, and also kind of maybe how like time code theory ties into that bigger picture as well, in terms of, the idea of legacy through your eyes.
Yeah, I would say legacy for me doesn't have anything to do with titles or trophies. It's not like something that I'm striving for, because those fade, right? 100,000 years from now, a nice shiny trophy on the wall, those things mean very little to me. It's about presence, and it's about whether the people I love will look back and say, oh, he gave us his hours. He didn't give us the leftovers. It wasn't, he wasn't exhausted and worked too hard that day and came home and that was all that I got. That's what really matters to me, because anyone can be successful on paper, but if your family, your friends only remember you as busy, distracted, or always somewhere else in your own mind, what can you actually build that's meaningful to you? Everything else is going to fade at the end. That's usually who you have there with you, that's taking care of you and helping you through that. But time code theory ties into legacy because it's about awareness. It helps you see where your hours are really going, which one are being stolen, which ones are noisy, and which ones you're choosing intentionally. So legacy is written into those choices. And practically that's where alignment comes in. How I keep family, health, and work in balance day to day. Me personally, I have these 2 tattoos right here. One of them says, they're constant reminders when I wake up. One says memento mori, and one that says memento vivere. Memento mori means remember to die, and memento vivere means remember to live. And every morning I wake up, I look at those and I'm like, that's right. All right, sit right between those 2 memories. I was born and I'm gonna die, and remember to stay right in. That's why it's so important, because the end is gonna come eventually. So better live well.
Man, oh man, Cody, thank you so much. I got chills as you were talking, because when you don't know how many people, you probably do, that I run across on a daily basis, probably you as well, that are living in that life you talked about. And sure, they might be rolling in a lot of money, bringing in or scaling their business. But that constant neurotic state of like, I'm not enough, right? They're almost like not whole with themselves, and they're just always chasing. Then they're not present with their family. The dreams that they want to accomplish, they sideline and sacrifice them because, they're not going to pay me as much right away. And just, it has vast impacts across your entire quality of your life. And I'll just share with you something that sort of ties in with this, that I call the 100-year-old mentality. And I write down for myself at least once or twice a month and try to do a full day where at least like every 30 to 60 minutes, I sit with a timer and I try to pretend like I'm laying on my deathbed at the age of 100 and reflect back to 35-year-old me and think about what would I do different? How would I react to life? What would be important to me today? How would I spend time with my family and show up with them? And, that's as far as I've gotten with it. So I'm excited to adopt a lot of a deeper approach, a more actionable approach from you. But that 100-year-old mentality is like, I think about the person that basically laid out all their, gifts and all the things they could have contributed in a natural and relaxed way, while also achieving goals because they're present. But they sacrificed all that because they just I got to prove something to myself. I got to get the trophy, right? But then I'm like, how does that person feel when they're 100? Did they feel whole about the sacrifices they made? That's between them and God, right? But for me, I'd never want to be sitting there on my deathbed going like, oh my gosh, I burnt through 5, 10, 20 years trying to like fill a void that just can't be filled through like achievement or accomplishment. But it doesn't mean that like guys like you and I want to just go like sleep on a beach. We'd lose our minds. We love achieving things, impacting people, building things and finding success. But it's like so important what you're saying. And I really hope like everybody listening does take that time to be like, yeah, am I really like living the life every day that I want? Or do I have some false perception that I have to not live the life I want to maybe someday get the life that I want, which I think is just ridiculous.
Yep. And I'll give you guys a quick little insight is, and what I'm currently building with the time code theory. I did put practices in every chapter because they're weighty. I'm a kind of philosophical guy when I get in that headspace and kind of poetic. So they're a little weighty. But the practices themselves are meant for people to be able to draw things that they can actually use live time in order to reorient themselves in a way that is going to have a ripple effect across their own lives. So if you have, you listen to this, you have no idea what it is that I just talked about, or any of it, most of it, I would hope is going to feel real because it was lived. That's what I'm trying to do with the book that I'm writing is bottle up what I fused with myself and put it into words that others can understand and draw from it and help reorient inside their own time, their own experience of time,
Man, awesome. And I will share out on the comment section for everybody watching a link where you can go get on the list for Cody's book and get access to that. But we got about 2 minutes left. I want to do a very, very rapid fire. We're talking like 15 seconds each. I have 4 hot questions for you and then give you a chance to, let people know where they can get a hold of you. So are you ready for a very, very quick rapid fire style line of questioning?
Throw it at me.
Okay. One book that changed your perspective on success.
The Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene.
Okay. A daily habit that you can't live without.
Learning something new, even if it's small, every single day. There's like 10 of them, but that one's probably my favorite. Yeah.
Cool. I saw you going through it, but no, that's strong. This isn't a big question for a rapid fire. The best advice you've ever received.
That your hours are basically your rent and success is rented, and every day you've got to pay with how you code your time.
All right. Final question. If you had 15 to 30 seconds to tell every sales producer in America one thing, what would it be?
Be fascinated with the hours of your own time, and it will take you on a journey to success no matter what.
Beautiful, man. Thank you so much for that. We got to love the old rapid fires, nothing like wanting to say more because there's a lot more to it, but just having to give a straight answer. But I appreciate you playing along with it. Some golden advice in there. And, as we kind of go to a wrap up here, one of the things I definitely want to do though, is make sure that people know how to get a hold of you, right? Whether it's to learn about time code theory, interact with you. Maybe you're an agency owner and you're like, man, I need some Cody in my life to figure out this business that I have going on and how to restructure my team or grow or, implement these strategies in and build that killer team that's crushing it. So where can people get a hold of you? How would you like them to reach out to you, Cody?
You can reach out to me. So you can reach out to me right at my team hired email. So it's Cody, CODY at teamhired, TEAMHIRED.com. I was a social media outcast for a long time. I just didn't like social media. So I don't really have that much socials. It's more just like family that follow me for like fun pictures and stuff. So there isn't much social arena to grab me on, although I will start one. So I've already secured the time code theory. So you could also follow that if you'd like to see the journey of as the book starts to come out and hopefully get finished and stuff like that. And then, of course, the wait list that Andy will share will send you a notification when that comes out. But that email is going to be my primary mode of contact, and then we can kind of go from there.
Awesome. Maybe if you're open to it, we could have you back on once that's released as well and do more of a time code theory breakdown, specifically just focusing on that for an hour if you're game in the future.
Absolutely. I'd love to do that. There's a lot to digest. It's about 75,000 words right now, so it'll be a little bit of a read, but I'm sure it'll spark some questions in your head, Andy, that you just got to know.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you very, very much for coming in, and congratulations to you on all your continued success. And I think what I, really admire the most about you is I feel like you're somebody who's really living life on their own terms, and you're not tied to the system. You've kind of broken away, and I just respect that so much, and I look up to it, and it's super inspiring that, you don't have to be a cog in the wheel. You can step out and make your own destiny. And I see you as somebody who's consistently reinvented the way that you go about doing that while remaining like super true to yourself. So a lot of respect to you and everything you've achieved. And
thank you. I like to say I'm nobody special, but that doesn't mean I can't try to do something special.
Hey, like everything that exists inside is coming out and like showing that code of you. And that's another piece of evidence as to why you operate the way that you do. So I love that. And just thank you so much for being on here. And for our audience, whether you're joining us live, you're listening to the rerun, you can find us also on Spotify, Apple, Stitcher. Really hope you guys got the most out of this today, as I did with Cody. And we'll be back with you next week, same time, same place here in the Insurance Syndicate Group for another episode of Ask the Experts. But in the meantime, I hope everybody has a blessed day and a great rest of your week. And Cody, thank you again.
Yes, take it easy. Good luck, everybody.